Hi guys, this is Mina from Mind Peace. I'm here today to talk to you about a very important emotion and quite a serious one actually. So it's to do with feeling guilty or the emotion of guilt. Sometime in our lives, everybody's experienced guilt. So even young children feel a little bit guilty about something they may have done. Now, the thing about feeling guilty is that it's an emotion that actually reduces our mood a lot. So it actually creates a lot of anxiety. It creates depression because we're thinking of something that we did that we felt quite guilty about. And actually makes you feel quite bad. So somebody could feel that they're not a great mum, they could feel that they're not a great daughter, they could feel that they're not a great father, they could feel that they're not a great friend, they could feel that they are not a great sibling. So sometime in our life, somewhere, everybody feels this guilt. And it doesn't have to be just relationships. You can feel guilty about not finishing tasks that you said you're going to do. It could be that you feel guilty that you have eaten a piece of cake when you should have had a nutritious meal. You could feel guilty about like numerous things. You could feel guilty if you're spending too much money or not enough time with your children, or you could feel guilty because you're indulging in something when you should be doing something else. So guilt pops up a lot. Unfortunately, it's one of those emotions that will pop up. And so for some people, it pops up a lot more. So some people are triggered by it a little bit more, and some people are able to manage the guilt because they may be doing something quite effective, and they may be speaking to the part of the brain that is responsible for reward. So for example, they might be talking to the reward center in the brain and saying, well, actually, I shouldn't feel guilty about that. If I've had a hard time and I have a snack, I shouldn't feel guilty about it. So they're able to sort of tap into that part of the brain and sort of reason about the guilt. With guilt, it's quite obvious when we're guilty. Like, we can be guilty because we've, like I said earlier, that you've eaten a piece of cake when you should have had a nutritious meal. It's quite tangible sometimes in terms of guilt. You feel guilty because you owed someone money and you didn't give it back. You could feel guilty because you promised somebody something and you didn't fulfill it. So we know generally why we're feeling guilty. Now, the difference between guilt and the other emotion, which is actually more damaging to your soul, to your body, to your mind, to your mental health, and that is shame. And the reason for that is because shame isn't that tangible. It's a feeling. It's such a strong feeling, a strong emotion that you've done something really bad and you've done something really wrong, and it's a feeling that you can just stay stuck inside. And sometimes what happens is somebody can feel quite guilty about something, and then suddenly that guilt over years can turn into something called shame. So shame is a very paralyzing emotion, because that's probably the best way to describe it. That whereas with guilt, you kind of know your sort of way around it, and you try to get your way around it, and you see your way around it, and you sort of accept that we're all guilty of something. Whereas shame is something that is very hidden, so people don't talk about it. We keep it private, and actually that's what gives it the most power. The most power is given because we don't talk about it, we don't discuss it, we don't tell anybody about it, so we keep it to ourselves, and we're quite ashamed of something, and then we feel this feeling of shame. And it doesn't mean we've done something wrong, it just means we feel it, okay? And the body has decided, and the brain has decided that it's actually going to hold on to this emotion of shame. Now, the thing about these emotions are they're not obviously healthy emotions, and we have to find ways of sort of releasing them. One of the reasons that they're not healthy is, in terms of mental health, is that it actually doesn't let the brain grow. So it actually shrinks your mind. So whenever we're anxious about something, well, if you're feeling guilty about something or shameful about something, it sort of comes with anxiety. And the typical scenario of anxiety is it actually shrinks our mind or shrinks our brain. And depression does that as well. So if that's happening to us every time we're feeling guilty, every time we're feeling ashamed, and it gets worse with shame, it's not a healthy place to be. It's simply not a great place to be. It's an awful feeling. Those of any of us who have felt guilt or shame, we know what it feels like. We can feel that emotion. And like I said earlier, sometimes it's just unexplained. We don't even know why. Why do we feel so guilty? Sometimes we try to justify it and say, oh, maybe because I didn't do that, or I didn't do this, or could have done this with my life, and I feel ashamed. I haven't done as well as I thought I was going to do, or, my relationships aren't all great as they should be, So things like that. So it can show up in any area of your life. So it doesn't have to be relationships. It can be academics. It can show up in your professional life. It can show up in your friendships, in your social circles. It can show up in any area of your life, and sometimes it can take you by surprise. So they're both very negative emotions. So really, I'm here to talk to you about what they are, which is the definition of them is this feeling or this emotion that I've done something wrong. I've done something wrong. Sometimes what happens is that even if we've done nothing wrong, we just feel that somebody's going to tap us on the back and say, you did that 10 years ago. It's a feeling, it's a constant feeling, even though that's not going to happen. The rational side of your brain knows, and your logical brain knows that you're okay, but the subconscious feels really unsafe. It feels unsafe. It doesn't feel safe to say, well, I feel guilty, and you know what, I'll sort it out. And like I said about shame, it's much more deeper. There's a deeper reason for that. So the best way to give you an example is, I've got a glass here. So if I drop this glass and I felt guilty about dropping the glass, I'd say, oops, oh dear, I've broken the glass, and that'll be it, that'll stop from there. Whereas if I felt ashamed about it, I'd say, I've dropped the glass and I'm so clumsy. What are they going to think of me? The glass, I shouldn't have put the glass at the edge of the table. It was my fault. It makes it much bigger. It makes the scenario much bigger than what it actually is, which is the glass has just fallen down on the ground. So there's a big difference between feeling guilty about something and feeling shameful about something. And because actually, if you take away those two emotions, then all you have is the practical mind saying, well, actually the glass was slightly perched on the edge and it just dropped, and it's fine. It's just dropped, no problem. But that's a very healthy mind that says that. Why do we feel guilt? Why do we feel shame? It would be great to answer that question, because why do we feel anything then? Every emotion has like a trigger. So sometimes when we're not feeling great in ourselves, sometimes when we're not feeling motivated in ourselves, sometimes when we're feeling really low mood, you hear the sound of shame and guilt get louder and louder in your mind, and that takes over, and then it becomes a very destabilizing emotion, and it keeps you very, very stuck. Okay, so it keeps you very, very stuck from doing anything that you want to do, or move on, or let go of anything, and it keeps you stuck. So for example, if a mother was really guilty about how she brought up her children, she will never let that go for years and years and years and years. And not put it down to, she had no support, or put it down to that we don't get a manual when we have children. She'll put it down to she failed as a mother, or he failed as a father. So whatever the relationship is. And we feed more and more into it. So we'll have a little story around it, and then we have another story attached to it. And that's how guilt grows, and then it grows into shame. Once it gets to the stage of shame, it's just highly debilitating. It really stops you in your tracks. It stops you from a lot of things to do. So some of the ways that we can look at shame and guilt is to try and look at it in a way that it's just another emotion that needs to be processed in the mind, in the body, and released. Usually a lot of work that I'm doing with clients in terms of trauma. So sometimes a trauma can trigger some sort of guilt, some sort of shame, and it needs to be released as well. Sometimes when people have been bullied for years, they carry this shame and guilt as if someone's going to bully them again in their adulthood, even though there's no real risk around, but they feel that might happen, so they carry that with them. So these emotions are really, for want of a better word, just negative, very negative emotions. They're holding us back, they're holding us down. Okay, so the best thing to do in terms of tackling these is to look at them slightly objectively and understand where did they actually originate from. Because if we can get back to where it originates from, so the very first time you felt shame, the very first time you felt guilty, where did it originate from? Was it somebody said something to you? Was it somebody behaved in a particular way? Was it something that happened in your school years? Did it happen in childhood? Did it happen when you were a teenager? Did it happen in your adult life that you suddenly developed this feeling of feeling ashamed? Because it could be some people are just absolutely really, really confident people, and then suddenly in their adulthood they feel a bit guilty and shameful about something, and they're carrying it. So it's really important to get to that emotion first, not ignore it, because what people do is they put their head in the sand and they say, well, you know what, I'm not going to talk about this. You're giving it more power. You're giving it more power and more energy by not actually speaking about it, because your focus is still there. So we need to focus on something, as well as looking at the emotion, why it's come, where did it come from, let's get rid of it, let's listen to what's happened, get rid of the trauma that's attached to it, and then release the shame and guilt. And I know it sounds, the way I'm saying it sounds really simple. The process is actually simple, but the journey is hard. Yeah, so we have to take that journey, and we have to have that work that needs to be done on that particular emotion, because otherwise you're not going to fulfill who you want to really be. So so if this is something that you feel that you are suffering with, like you're feeling guilty or you're feeling ashamed of something, it's better to speak to somebody, because I talked about this before as well in a couple of videos, that it's the monster that you know is better than the monster that you don't know. So open it up for discussion, bring it out. And sometimes you'll feel a little, bad about saying it, and it'll feel a bit odd doing it. But once you've done it, opened up what it is, you'll realise it's actually released a lot quicker, through work. And this is obviously the work that I'm doing I continue to do. So one of the positive things to do after that is, once it's released, we need to know how we want to feel. So if all your life, if somebody has suffered, unfortunately, all their life with guilt, or a lot of the time they can remember that they've got 20 odd years of shame or guilt, then they need to work on how would they prefer to feel. What is the emotion that we need to replace? What is the feeling we want to have instead? Do we want power, confidence? Do we want to be free? Do we want to speak our mind? What is the emotion that you want? Do you want contentment, happiness? Do you want to just release this so that you can get somewhere else where you're desperate to go? So we need to really think about what is the new emotion, powerful emotion that we can give to you. So usually sometimes it's confidence and power in particular. Is it assertiveness? Do you need to have happiness? Do you need to have freedom? Because you need this new emotion and this new power. So it's what we call the why. If your why is big enough, you will release the shame, the guilt, and all the sort of emotions around it, and you will actually walk and sort of fly like a butterfly towards this new emotion where there's a lot of safety, security, a lot of hope, a lot of love, a lot of compassion for yourself. It's really important that we have a lot of compassion for ourselves, for us to grow. If we're stuck in these feelings of, I feel ashamed of, I feel guilty of, I feel guilty because, I feel ashamed because, she makes me feel guilty, he makes me feel guilty. So we need to answer these questions. If you think about them as sentences, finish the sentence off. Finish it off. What is this guilt? Once we're able to release this, it's a very, very powerful experience that people have during therapy. And I've seen people transformed within weeks, because they believed that they weren't able to release it. They believed that that this guilt will stay forever. They believed that they will feel like this forever. They believed that the shame will never leave them. But the belief is soon shattered, because then they learn that actually what I really want is much bigger than holding on to this emotion. Let go of that emotion, see what's out there for you, because there could be something magnificent out there for you, and it's not could be, there will be something magnificent out there for you once you release the shame and guilt, because it isn't yours to own. It isn't yours to own. So we need to release that, give it back into society or whatever it is, wherever you want to place that. Put it back into somewhere, in a black hole somewhere, because it doesn't belong to you. And these are things that you need to talk through, do talking through therapy as well. In the mind therapy that I do, I always look at the why. Why do you want to release it? What has it served you so far? Because sometimes people have a habit of having guilt and shame for such a long time that they've got into a habit of it. And what is it doing? How is it serving you? Even though we have a negative emotion, that negative emotion is definitely serving you somehow. And you can't necessarily see on a conscious level, why am I holding on to this shame and guilt? Why should it be mine? But on a subconscious level, it's doing something for you. It's protecting you maybe. It's making you not have to communicate. It's making you maybe hide, disappear. You know, it's serving you, but in a negative way. And that's become your habit. So in order to change this having this emotion is like having a bad habit. We need to release it. We need to get rid of it. So going forward, think of the why. The why needs to be much bigger than your guilt and shame. Why would I release this today? Why will I release shame today? Why will I release guilt today? What will I get? What difference will it make if I do that? How will it change my life? How will it free me? Really important question is, how will it free me? And how will I become a different person? And why is that different person better than what I am today? Why is that? So think about those questions. Just have a think about those questions as well. Even if you're doing this, watching this video, and you can do it as well. Think about the questions I asked. I am guilty because he made me feel guilty by, she made me feel guilty by. I'm holding on to shame because. So once you can answer those questions through the subconscious, we learn and understand what the real emotion might be underneath guilt and shame. It might be something totally different. It might be fear. It may be anger. It may be that you believe that you should not be heard and seen. You know, that's what guilt and shame is doing for you. It's just putting you away in a little box, hiding you away. So it's really important that we do deal with these emotions, because they can hold you back a lot. So the why has to be massive. It has to be much bigger than the guilt and shame that you're feeling. Once you get the why and you feel the why, it's really important to visualize as well the why. So I want to get rid of shame because I'm going to feel great, and it's going to look like this. That this has to be massive. It has to be huge. It has to be big. It has to be, fantastic. You have to feel great. You have to feel good. You have to have a bigger why. I will feel like this, and then visualize it. I will look like this. This is what I will look like. This is what I will speak like. This is what I'll behave like. This is where I'll be. This is how my environment will change. So make that really massive, and then that will really help to subside the guilt, because the brain is really good with repetition. The more you repeat good stuff to it, good emotions, good whys, good visualization that I want this and this is how it's going to look like. See, I'm going to, really, really think of all your senses. You really want to experience that sensory achievement of getting rid of guilt. How will it feel? What will it look like? That will push you forward massively. So I hope you found this video useful along those two really serious emotions of guilt and shame. If it is something you're really struggling with and you just want to release it, you want to get rid of this and forever, do come and work with me. This is probably where I've had most of the success with people, because sometimes we're stuck in a trauma and we don't even realise it's trauma. We don't realise we're actually stuck in some sort of trauma here. And then when we release that emotion of guilt and shame, it's really powerful. Thank you so much for listening, and keep keep posting on my group, and thank you very much for joining my group, especially the new members recently. And have a fabulous week, and I will see you soon. So bye from Mina. Bye.